So, hi everybody. My name's Teresa and I work within the East Sussex Neurodevelopmental Service. I'm an advanced nurse practitioner within the team. I've been working with ADHD for about 18 years now, solely with that. I've been a nurse for much longer than that. But what I often say is that I've also been using understanding ADHD for 38 years, because that's the age of one of my oldest sons, who does have ADHD. And within our family, we have a lot of neurodiversity. So we have autism and Tourette's as well, alongside dyslexia. So understanding ADHD. We're going to do a quick poll, which Sophie's going to do. Are you putting that in the chat, Sophie?
I will be, yes.
Hopefully everybody, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the ADHD, this, because literally I could speak for 8 hours about it. So we've kind of condensed it a lot. And I've also, at the end, there's a lot of questions that were sent in, so I've had to take bits out, but I'll try and talk about them as we go through. So let me know when it's in the chat and I'll just nip on to the next couple of slides.
Just having an issue, so do carry on, but I will add it in 2 seconds.
Okay. So what is ADHD? So there are a lot of myths about ADHD. There's a lot of stuff online, there's a lot of stuff on TikTok, there's a lot of stuff on social media. It's kind of a big subject at the moment, lots of people talking about it. And actually, it's part of the October being ADHD Awareness Month, looking at the myths. So people with ADHD is a common myth that they just can't concentrate. Well, it's not as simple as that. So people with ADHD can concentrate when they're really interested in or really intrigued by what they're doing. Another myth is only boys have ADHD. Boys are diagnosed 2 to 3 times more often as girls, but about 4.2% of girls have received a diagnosis of ADHD. And I think that's actually changing. I think particularly in adult services, it's now 50-50. And that's, it is growing constantly, and people recognizing the different way that things present. All children grow out of ADHD. That used to be a really common one when my son was young. So significant symptoms and impairments persist in 50 to 86% of people with ADHD. And what we tend to say is that it is a lifelong disorder, but sometimes it goes into remission. And like with a lot of things, the more stress there is in your life, the more those things might come back out again. ADHD is caused by bad parenting. I remember that one so vividly and so well. Parents don't cause ADHD. It's as simple as that. The disorder comes from an accumulation of many environmental and genetic risk factors. ADHD meds are addictive. They're simply not. They're not made to be, can't be. And the therapeutic use of stimulant medications for ADHD does actually help and prevent addiction. There's quite a lot of research that's been done around that. ADHD doesn't exist, and that was a really common one when my son was little. It was, a made-up thing that came over from America. But there's more than 100,000 articles in science journals on ADHD, and so many books around ADHD now. But actually, it was discovered not so long ago. We used to think it was from around 1902, but actually there was a textbook found, last one in existence, that actually described perfectly ADHD in 1775. So it's not a new disorder. It's been around a very long time. Have you got the poll going?
Yes, it's up and running.
Brilliant. I'll just click on this one then. So Fidgety Phil is a really famous poem, and it's from 1844. It's German initially, but you'll find it's fully translated on, you can find it on Google if you Google it. It's a very long poem, but it actually describes ADHD. So Fidgety Phil, he won't sit still. He wriggles and giggles, and then I declare swings backwards and forwards and tilts on his chair. And that's just to show that actually how long it's been going. So let me know when you've got the results of that, Sophie.
So I can show them now.
Right.
I just share the screen quickly.
Go on then. Oh, yes. I remember you have to do that, don't you?
I know, sorry. I have to interrupt your flow. So there you go.
Fantastic. We've got some experts in tonight then. That's great. So that's really good. Thank you, everyone.
There we go. Back to you now.
And share. Make sure I don't share the wrong one. So what are the symptoms of ADHD? As you all sorry. This is why I've got Elodie and Holly here, because otherwise I get totally distracted and completely forget that I'm doing something else. There we go. So what are the symptoms of ADHD? As a lot of you actually identified, the hyperactivity, the inattention, the impulsivity, and there's also a lot of stuff around other bits that come into that, but we'll kind of hint and talk about those as we go through. The behaviours when we're assessing must be exhibited to a degree which is inappropriate for the child's developmental age, and secondly observed as impeding their capacity to regulate their behaviour in a developmentally appropriate way. And that word comes up a lot, and that's about when we're assessing, we're looking at the stage they're at, not necessarily their chronological age, and is that behaviour appropriate for that stage that they are at. So the hyperactivity, they fidget, they fiddle, they move about, they leave the seat, they run around, they climb. They have difficulty engaging in activities quietly. They could be described as always on the go, as if driven by a motor, often talk excessively. And the quality of the overactivity is disorganised, haphazard, and contextually inappropriate. The inattention has the difficulty in sustaining concentration due to being highly distractible. Every area of his development is affected in terms of staying on task long enough to take on board and register what needs to be learned. So really poor at filtering distractions, attending to work tasks, attention to detail, careless mistakes, short-term memory processing problems, not following through on things, difficulty with that mental effort if something is really going to require a lot of focus. They often kind of find ways to avoid that, even if it is within their capability. And they can seem oblivious or daydreaming, and very poor organisational self-tasks and activities. And the impulsivity, acting without any thought about the consequences. So with this one, we often see constant interrupting in the classroom, butting in, saying the wrong things without thinking, poking other children because they've got an urge to. And this can start to cause problems with this on the social scene with making friends. And these actions can sometimes then be interpreted as oppositional and antisocial. And this is where we start to see that self-fulfilling prophecy begin to take shape. So when we're talking about that, what we're looking at is negative cycles. So if you think about for a child, if they're getting negative reports, they're getting in trouble at school, and then they're in trouble at home, the results are that they start to feel really bad about themselves and start to think that they can't get anything right and that things don't go well for them. And the danger with that is that they can get good at being quite bad at it. So if you're not going to, it's that thing where if constantly everybody is cross with you, what's the point in trying? So a better way to think about ADHD is that they have problems around managing emotions, following directions, shifting their focus from one thing to another, thinking before saying things, keeping things in their minds, their working memory, getting started on tasks and focusing on what's important and managing their time. This is the bit that's going to be really interesting to see if I can make it work. Yay.
Hi, we all have ADHD, and we're going to tell you a bit about it. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Did you know that anyone can have ADHD, even adults? About 1 in 20 children have ADHD, which is more than 1 in every class. Someone in your family may even have it too.
If you have ADHD, you might feel like you have a lot more energy than others, find it hard to pay attention, get distracted easily, find it hard to sit still, or not shout out or interrupt others.
Lots of people feel like this sometimes, but for someone with ADHD, it might feel like this most or all of the time. This can't get in the way of doing important things, like in school with homework and friendships. This can sometimes get them into trouble more than others.
Not everyone with ADHD has the same difficulties. ADHD can appear in different ways at different times for different people. That's why sometimes it's hard to tell who has it.
Some people may also have difficulties with reading, spelling, or being clumsy. Some may have difficulties communicating with people or have bigger emotions than others, like feeling more worried, sad, or angry.
Scientists have found that the brains of people with ADHD can work in a special way, including parts of the brain that help with things like attention, stopping and waiting before doing things, and organising thoughts or actions.
For me, ADHD feels like you are watching TV, listening to music, and talking to someone all at the same time. It's really hard to know what to pay attention to.
A special doctor can tell if you have ADHD. They will speak to you, your family, and your teachers to find out more about you and think very carefully before deciding if somebody has ADHD or not. They will also talk about the type of help you might need.
Knowing that you have ADHD can help you and others understand you better. You might need help with things that you find hard, and that's okay. It's important to find out what these are and talk to your family, teacher, or doctor about it.
There are some things that you might be able to do to help yourself with support of your family and teachers. For example, taking breaks or having a chart of what you need to do can help some people. Eating well, trying to get a good night's sleep, and getting regular exercise is important too.
Some children with ADHD need medicine to help with their difficulties, and some do not. Not everything works for everyone, and nothing works all the time, so it's best to find things that suit you and that you enjoy too.
Scientists don't know what exactly causes ADHD yet, but they know that it's complicated, with lots of different things acting together, including genes, which are instruction manuals in our bodies that help make us who we are, and the environment, which are the different things that happen to us in our lives.
Although it can be hard sometimes, there are some good things about ADHD. It doesn't stop people from achieving their dreams and being successful. Lots of famous people, like some athletes and actors, have ADHD too. In fact,
ADHD helps me have amazing ideas.
I'm one of the funniest kids in school. I have lots more energy than others.
I have fun in everything I do. I can think of more questions to ask teachers than any other person in my class.
ADHD is just one part of who you are, and it's okay to have ADHD.
Find out more about ADHD by going to ncmh.info/ADHD.
That didn't work.
Press the escape button to come out of the full screen and then go back to the slides.
Okay, thank you.
We can test it on the next video.
If I dare try. So let me go back. Let's go past that before I get stuck again. Okay. So assessing ADHD. One of the most, oh yeah, sorry. Oh, now it's gone back there. It's escape button, you say? Right. I've got it. Now if I go back here. No. Sorry, everybody. I forgot to apologise at the start for being a bit rubbish with tech. There we go. Assessing ADHD, why does it take so long? It's a really common question. Why does it take so long? Isn't it easy just to spot it? And what does an assessment look like? So in an assessment, what we're looking at is a holistic approach. So we're looking at the young people as a whole, everything about them. And there's lots of different things that can actually present as if they're ADHD. And therefore, in the assessment, a lot of information is collected so that clinicians can make decisions and pull together information and to think about, is it ADHD that's causing a problem, or is it something else? And are there any other difficulties that also impact the young person? And the difficulties must be pervasive. This means that they have been present over a period of time. So an important question to ask is, when did the problems start? And we have 2 diagnostic manuals where the diagnostic criteria is set out. And we have the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. The ICD-11 was recently updated and now mirrors the DSM-5, because previously we used the DSM-5 because the ICD-10 meant that you had to have all of that evidence prior to the age of 7. But it's now moved so it's more in line with the other. And actually what we need to show is that the problems and the difficulties are being present before the age of 12 years, and we must demonstrate that. There's no one assessment or no diagnostic assessment for ADHD. So that makes it much more difficult, and we have to gather information from lots of different areas. So what kind of information do we want? Absolutely everything. It's a very holistic approach. So we go from the early developmental history, including the pregnancy and the birth and how they met their milestones. When did you start to worry about them and what was causing that worry? What is the problems now? How long have they been present? Is there any sudden changes? The medical history for you and your children. How is their learning? And there's no too much information. Lots of detail in the forms is so helpful. And if you're able and you've got copies of reports or any other assessments that have been done, sending them in at the same time is really, really helpful. It does save us a lot of time. So when we're looking at ADHD and when we talk about it crossing over with other things, there are lots of things that have this very, very similar symptoms. So if you just look at the anxiety, if you look at the overlap in the middle, the crossover is around inattention, distraction, fidgety, restless, disorganized, poor time management. And again, with trauma, difficulties concentrating, other crossovers, easily distracted, often doesn't seem to listen, disorganization, hyperactivity. So again, we're kind of looking at all of that history and thinking, is it this or is it this or is it something else? And again, also with the fetal alcohol syndrome, you can see again the symptoms present ADHD with the hyperactivity, the impulsivity, but again, the hyperactivity, the poor memory issues, the distractibility are all part of fetal alcohol as well. A neurodevelopmental disorder is a really complex area. And again, we've got the Tourette's syndrome where you've got a lot of crossover, and also with the autism where, again, you have a lot of symptoms that appear in both. So pulling apart that within assessment actually can be quite difficult. Lots of people also talk about, I've always said ADHD, and it's very rare to just see ADHD on its own. And what we talk about are comorbidities, which are things that go with ADHD. And they can include things like dyslexia, anxiety, depression, autism, Tourette's. And these are very common things to have alongside. So when we're looking, often what we're looking at is, if they've already got a diagnosis of autism, that's great because we've got that information. But if they haven't got any other disorders and we start to see those symptoms, then we're looking at how can we support that young person access so that they can have those things identified as well. And when we get to the end of the assessment process, within the criteria, the diagnostic, there are 5 areas and we must meet all 5 areas in order to award that diagnosis. So symptoms must be at least 6 out of the 9, and the symptoms must be present before the age of 12, and can you document that? Are the symptoms present in other settings, because ADHD doesn't appear in one setting only? What impact do the symptoms have? So there needs to be some impact around how they're managing social, academic life. And the assessment needs to have ruled out other causes, so the symptoms aren't explained by those other disorders. So it does become much more complex than people think. You don't just look at someone and think, oh, they're really lively, and that's ADHD. It has to be quite thorough because we need to document, and that documentation needs to be robust for their future. So many people, if they've applied or are on the waiting list already, might have heard about QB testing. What is it? It stands for quantified behaviour testing. It's used across the world and it's well researched. It's cleared by the FDA in America and the European Medical Association as both an assessment and treatment of ADHD. And it also now has its own nice guidance. QB test is a registered medical device, and what it's designed to do is provide objective data in relation to the core symptoms of ADHD, and those test results are matched against the age and gender norms. So they're always matched against people that don't have ADHD. So for children aged 6 to 12 years, there's a test where it's a go, no go. So they have either a circle or a circle with a cross, and they have to press every time they see the circle without the cross. And people often ask, can they stay in when we're doing the test? The answer is no, you can't stay in the room because it's a standardized test. So it has to be done, set up and followed through in an exact way. If it's not, it invalidates the results at the end. But you can come in, see how it's set up, get a feel for what it looks like. But when we're giving the test instructions, you do have to be quiet, otherwise they won't be able to hear them. And can you have the results on the day, which is another one? No, absolutely not, because the test results have to be reviewed by the trained staff and those that are qualified to interpret them. And also that particular bit, the QB test, forms part of the whole assessment. It's not diagnostic. So you have to take that bit of information with the information you've got from other areas, from the developmental observation, and also your observational data. For this 12 to 60s, then they have to do a 20-minute test, and they click on the same shape and colour being repeated. And it's not an easy test. These tests are quite boring, actually. They're not designed to be really fun or great to do. So what do we mean when we say objective data, and why is it important? The objective data means it's factual information that can't be measured, and the outcome will not change depending on who is reviewing the information. And it's important in ADHD that we rule out those differential diagnoses. And when we're talking about a differential diagnosis, we're talking about the process of differentiating between two or more conditions that share signs and symptoms that are very similar. So the assessment needs to take into account what could be causing those difficulties that are being reported. So what does a test look like, and why do you have to be trained? So that's a typical ADHD QB test result. So now you can see why they're actually much more difficult to understand. There's lots of graphs, there's 3 pages in all, and they vary and require training to learn how to read the data that's contained in the report. When I learned this was about 12, maybe a bit longer now, years ago. The first question I asked when they set it all up, showed me how it worked, and then printed that out. The first question I asked was, is there not a yes or no page? And the answer is no, there isn't, because it's about gaining information that supports the information that you've gained from parents, the information you've got from school, the information that you also get in the observation, which is done whilst they're there. And then you put that all together. So another question that often comes up is, what happens if your child can't do a QB test? And absolutely don't worry about that. They're not offered to everybody. There might be specific reasons why your child can't do it. They might have a visual problem that might make that very difficult or unfair for them to do. They could have learning disability, and really struggle to understand the test results, and that would make that unfair for them as well. And our clinicians will always seek to complete an observation in school, or they might offer an appointment in clinic and do the assessment there. Sometimes when we have really complex cases, or we're really stuck and can't work out, actually, is it this, or is it this, or is it this, we might even do QB test, clinical appointment and classroom observation. So how do we use this when we're looking at treatment? So this is a QB test from a young person that gave me permission to use this. And this one on this side here was his initial QB test as part of his assessment. And he did get a diagnosis of ADHD, and as you can see, there's a lot of movement there. And then he went on to have some medication. And on the review of the medication, parents and school were both saying, actually, the medication's okay, but his behaviour is really not okay. You know, he needs to learn to do this and learn to do that. And the young person was saying to me, he was about 12 at the time, No, it's not that. It's this medication. I really don't like it. It doesn't make me feel right. I can't do things properly. So I asked him if he would do another test, which is a big thing because these are not, they're not fun tests to do. And he agreed to do it. And actually what we could see was actually that he was right. The medication actually did make things worse for him. So then we looked at what else could be helpful, what could we try, what type of medication might be better for him. And then once we found the medication that worked for him, and he was saying, actually, this is great, this is really wonderful, I am doing so much better. I said, do you want to do another QB test? Which he kind of groaned at, but agreed to do. And this is the difference that we can see. So we can often use the QB test to look at, is treatment actually being really useful? Is the medication actually helpful to the young person? And that's why really listening to them, even when they're little, they can tell us a lot about how it makes them feel. And it's so important that we listen to them. So for a lot of parents, I think the questions are around, is there anything you could be doing? When we're looking at the assessment process, it is a long process. And I think from the group that we did this morning, I think there were some questions around how do you make referrals? And obviously the most useful way is to go to the school, have a chat with the Senko. But also keep in mind that we literally get hundreds of referrals each month, and that is partly why our lists are so long, and they are growing at the moment, but everybody is working so hard on it. So anything that you could do while you're waiting. So having an active role in managing ADHD. So when we look at the ADHD symptoms, behavior problems and mood, we also then start to look at sleep, diet and exercise as well. And we call this the dynamic trio. So sleep. The facts are that all children need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night. We know in the UK that everybody's kind of there's a lot of sleep issues in the UK as well. But increasing your child's sleep by even half an hour dramatically improves school performance. It's been known that by addressing sleep problems as a child's ADHD symptoms can improve, and studies suggest that better sleep will improve child's concentration and ability to learn. So when we look at what the impact of poor sleep has, it affects the concentration, fatigue at school, real problems in getting them up in the morning, it increases hyperactivity, and there's a knock-on effect for the family as well. And when we think about our snooze and lose equations, X-spots before bedtime has a massive impact. You've got light going in through the optic nerve, tells the brain it's still daylight, there's no need to sleep, and makes people hypervigilant. Caffeine is a stimulant, it overrides the natural sleep production of adenosine, which then means that if we override it, it doesn't tell us, our body's not going to tell us that it's time for sleep. Internet and TV can be exciting. We know ourselves if we start online and we start looking through things, literally time flies. And sugar can be a real irritant, and if you've got those things all together, we've got the child insomniac. So having a really good sleep hygiene is good. So bedtimes at the same time each night, and waking times the same each morning, and they're what we call your anchor points. And when you have anchor points, it means that your body starts to adjust and expect to sleep at certain points and expect to wake at certain points. And our bodies are really clever because they will actually pick this up quite quickly. Avoiding that stimulating activity the hour before bedtime. Bath is part of the routine about 30 minutes before bed, helps to regulate the temperature and increases the levels of melatonin your body produces. The movement from downstairs to upstairs, bathroom to bedroom. Avoiding naps later in the day. Bedroom that is quiet and dark, calm and cozy, but not full of those distractions, and that the temperature's at a comfortable level. And for anyone that's got a child that's a real worrier, having a pen and paper by the bed so they can jot down those worries and then go off to sleep can be helpful. So when you want to look at where to get help for the sleep, because we often hear about people struggling with sleep while they're waiting, check your local area. A lot of areas, the school nursing services provide sleep advice and sleep hygiene, and some areas have sleep services. I know in my area, the pathway is that you go to the school nursing, and if what they do doesn't help, then they refer into sleep services. But we don't have a sleep service, so we can't do that. There's apps such as the Calm that's got loads of stories that you can play before bedtime that are relaxation and mindfulness stories. Audio books some people find really helpful, and there are other apps as well. And then the sleep aids like the lights and clocks that mimic daylight cycles, the daylight lamps and white noise, and online sleep help by the Sleep Charity and the Sleep Council. You'll get loads of tips as well. And I think, forget whether it's the council or the charity, one of them's got a whole page on teenage sleep as well. When we're looking at diet, one of the questions that we often get asked is there a specific ADHD diet? And you often see, even I see it as when I'm online as well, things pop up and go, hey, here's the great ADHD diet, it's going to cure everything. The current advice is that we actually just follow the normal recommendations, so avoiding high sugar and artificial preservatives and colorings, cutting out caffeine, and aim for regular meals with fruit, veg, protein, all those normal things. The Healthier Family Better Health app is a good one to go to. And also, if you notice that there's certain foods that actually seem to make things worse. So actually, if they've had a ton of Haribo, I know of my son, it was anything red, anything with red colorings in, and woof, off he went. Or, you know, they've had energy drinks and then they're super hyper. You try and work those out of the diet, try and make sure they don't have them, and so that you can manage that better. And when it comes to exercise, this is a big area of research at the moment. So exercise and ADHD symptoms, it helps turn on the attention system. So the executive functions, the parts of our brains that are affected, it really helps with sequencing, prioritizing, inhibiting, and sustaining attention. It also maintains chemicals that help still the impulsivity and cravings for immediate gratification. And it heightens focus and helps with fidgetiness. So involving your child in fun activities that they are likely to stick to is really useful. And team activities, if you want to encourage social engagement. And in the group earlier, we were talking about a lot of areas now have specialist groups or teams, activities that are for neurodivergent young people or for those with SEN needs as well. I know in my area I have 1066 specials, but also I've got a number of young people that belong to Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, because they also have a team for young people that have additional needs as well. So it's worth looking at what's available in your area, Googling it, because it really does make a difference. You know, the kids actually really love getting involved in things. And if schools, particularly an area that's difficult for them, being able to achieve in another area is so good for their self-esteem and their development. And also encourage that active one-to-one time with your child, giving lots of support and encouragement. So one of the things that I'm really quite passionate about is I would not have been doing this job for as long as I've been doing if I didn't actually really like ADHD young people. I find them great. As a parent, I didn't always find my son great. I still think he's great now, though. He still has ADHD as well. But when I work with young people, I love their energy. I love their unique way of looking at things. I love the fact that they can be incredibly honest, that they come up with fantastic ideas, that they're often really skilled in certain areas. They're really fast thinking. They can be incredibly funny sometimes. And that doesn't negate some of those difficulties that come along with parenting as well. But it's really important that we start to think about how we encourage young people to develop that positive image. I think the saddest things I've ever heard in all the time I've worked with young people, I remember the young person whose QB test that I showed you, the before when he was on, and then the next one with the medication. I remember him really vividly one day saying to me, why do you take the time to talk to me? You know, I'm just an ADHD. And I think that's an awful thing for a young person to grow up thinking. So the more that we develop their ability to think positively, and I think there's such a shift now in terms of neurodivergence and the way it's being spoken about, and thinking more about how that is a part of someone, it's who they are, as opposed to just being a difficulty or a problem. I think those things need to be encouraged and support with our young people to be able to develop those better images of themselves. And there's lots of famous people with ADHD, and I always think it's never actually that hard to imagine why we have Olympians with ADHD when you think about the impact that really good sports activities has on young people and their ability to function. So behaviour, what is it? Can you change it? What helps and why? And from our earlier group, we picked up from the chat that someone put in there that they were really worried about putting strategies in place to help with behaviour, because they felt that if they did that, then their child might not get a diagnosis for ADHD. And what I would say is really listen to the importance of what we're trying to say around helping young people develop a good image of themselves. And if you put strategies in place, it's not about curing ADHD, because there isn't a cure for ADHD, whether that's medication or behaviour strategies. What we're trying to do is support young people to feel good about themselves, because the last thing we want is young people growing up thinking that they can't get anything right. It has such a huge impact for them. So if you look at anything about ADHD, any bit of literature, if you look at your nice guidance, they are going to say these words: structure and routine. So when we look at it, it's like scaffolding. We've all got behaviour, not just ADHD children. All of us behave in different ways. And we all know, actually, sometimes we don't always behave in the right way. So having a routine supports your child and it makes the daily functioning more manageable. So it helps them to focus on one thing at a time, provides organisation and predictability, and that equals reduced stress. So keeping a routine, using clocks and timers, simplifying the schedule and use reminders, plan ahead and organise, and don't forget to add in downtime and quiet space. And I was saying earlier with a couple of my families, and we were looking at things are going okay in the daytime, the school's working well, but actually there were these flash points in the evening where he was losing his temper, things were going downhill, people were having arguments and everybody was getting cross in the evening. It wasn't very nice for anyone. And when we really kind of pulled that down, they're both actually in secondary school, and secondary school days are longer. There's a lot more struggle for young people with ADHD because they have to be more organised themselves. They've got to be from one room to another, remember their stuff. So actually that pressures can grow at that point. And where previously mum might have been doing a lot of kind of structuring and scaffolding, they're actually moving into secondary school and getting home and the day having been longer, and mum saying, put your shoes away, get your bag up, wherever's your homework and all that kind of thing. And it went boom, every day it was going boom. So we looked at ways where actually what did we need to put in to help with that. And actually what we came up with, and the young person identified, was I just need that bit of time to decompress. I can't cope with another load of instructions the minute I've come out of school. So what we did was that actually one has half an hour, one has an hour at the end of the school day. So when they get home, no one talks to each other. They say hi, that's it. They go and have their own space to decompress. And also what they put in place was a whiteboard where, rather than kind of going, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you got that? The things were put on the board and then the young person just wiped them off when they'd done them. And it saved a lot of the pressures, and actually everything kind of settled down and they stopped having those arguments in the evening. So role modelling as well. They learn from us how we manage when things are frustrating, and also maintaining a really positive attitude and believing in your child, because how we feel, they will know how we feel. Feelings are infectious. So the first steps are understanding your child. So their personality, we are all different. Some of us are easily frustrated. Some people are more enthusiastic than others. Some are naturally able to remain calm. So learn about your child. Do you understand them, or are they a bit of a mystery? And when we understand them, then we can better understand the function of behaviour. So remember, children with ADHD are not deliberately trying to misbehave, even if it feels that way. And I know it feels that way. I can remember it vividly thinking. And also I think sometimes we do laugh about this, but one of my most vivid memories is standing there one day just screaming, do you just like to hear me moan every day, all day? Because at that point I was just like, what else can I do? So learn the difference on how ADHD impacts their behaviour and when, like every child, they are just trying it on, because all children do that. And they all have their moments for doing that as well. So when we're looking at the function of behaviour, children will never do it, and actually most adults, no adult does this, we just don't do this. We don't do anything without having a benefit from it. So whether that benefit might be I feel bad and I want an argument, there's still a benefit to it. We don't always think consciously about it, but we do have benefits to it. But children are very here and now, and they act for optimizing the rewards in that moment. So if you have a temper tantrum and they get what they want, they're going to think that works. So we're more likely to get more temper tantrums. And they learn from us, they watch our reactions and they follow our leads. And as parents and the caregivers, you're the most important people in your child's life. Adopting strategies mean you provide them with the best chance to learn. So when we're starting, one of the things that Nice Guidance says, what we recommend is taking a parenting course. And this will add to your toolbox of strategies to manage behaviour. Most parents find it really helpful. The parents that I've had that have gone to different parenting groups have all said the same thing. It was really great. It was wonderful to see other people, to talk to other parents that actually were in the same situation, and to get ideas on how to handle things as well. In your area, you'll find that there's lots of different parenting groups available. If you Google them, also on our website, if you go into our neurodevelopmental pathway bits, you'll find that there's a section for East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove, and it'll have links in there for lots of different available resources. But I know in my area, I often send people off to what's called Open for Parents. And they've got an amazing array of different kinds of online groups that you can join, you can sign up to, and they cover multiple areas as well, so lots of different subjects. If you're going to start a behaviour strategy, or you're going to put in some behaviour management, or you're trying to address a particular issue, talk to your partner, your family members when you decide to introduce the new strategies, because you need them to understand and be on board. And you plan and think about what you want to tackle the most. Is it morning, getting out to school or work on time without being flustered, without all of the stress that goes with that sometimes, and working on one thing at a time. And remember, do it with them, not for them, because we want them to learn. And one of the things that we know about how human beings are and how they react is that we tend to be what we call task reward people. So if I was to this evening have finished what I was doing earlier and then decided to put my feet up and make myself a really huge hot chocolate with loads of whipped cream and tons of marshmallows and snuggle down on the sofa, I'd be really reluctant to get back up off of that and do anything else. But if I think to myself, oh, I really need to do this, and afterwards I'm going to have the biggest hot chocolate with loads of whipped cream and lots of marshmallows, I'm going to do it that way round. So that will make me more motivated to do it. So we want to then think about the patterns that we've got. So if our young people get up and they go straight on their tablet or they're straight on their game, you're trying to get them to brush their teeth and get dressed for school. This is where the battle will come in. So what we want to do is flip it and actually go, right, okay, yeah, absolutely, you can have that time on that iPad or on that game, but you're going to have to do that after you've got up, brushed your teeth, got dressed and had your breakfast. Then if you've done all that, you can have that bit of time, as long as we're setting out. So we get into that, you get the thing that you want because you've done the other stuff, and actually setting up the routines around that as well. So when you want to get their attention and speak to them, use their name, Make sure they're not distracted by anything else. So don't give them a list of instructions while they're still on Fortnite, because they won't have heard a word of it. They're not going to listen. They're more interested in what is going on there. Remain calm, and that's a really tough one, and I'll be the first person to put my hand up and say I have made so many mistakes and I was not always calm. I learned things the hard way sometimes. Give short instructions, one thing at a time. If you give them a list of things, they will not be able to follow it and get past step one. Most of the time they won't have remembered any of it. So if we really want to help them, we kind of need to give them instructions in a way that's going to be helpful to them. So I can remember very vividly telling my son to go up to his room and to start tidying it up, you know, and half an hour later when I go up there, he's sitting there playing with something. He's made more mess than ever, because I didn't give him any instruction on what to do, you know. So actually what I really want you to do is get all of your socks out from under your bed, because I want them in the wash. And then after that's done, right, next, I want you to pick up your towels and your trousers and think about that as well. And other hints and tips for that in terms of the bedroom, what I discovered was wardrobes were hopeless, because all I ever had was a floor robe. And I replaced the wardrobes with baskets and shelves. So it was really simple and easy. So you had a basket for your socks and a basket for your pants, and your shelves, you just had your t-shirts and your jeans and things like that. And it just made life so much easier than the constant battle around pick your clothes up, hang them on the hanger, put them in the wardrobe, because it just was never going to happen. And think about their age. Is what you're asking reasonable for their age and developmental level? And think about as well, the last time anyone shouted instructions at you, did you actually want to do it? And how did you feel? Because I know if someone shouts instructions at me, I am likely to do the complete opposite. Or more than likely, I will do the complete opposite, because I can be a little bit stubborn like that. Aim for a calm approach. That means that they are listening and that they might want to work alongside us and be kind of with us on it. Scaffolding. What can your child do? So really understanding where your child's developmental level is, what are they actually able to do, and map out the things that they can do without your help, and pick the right level of tasks and games for them. And then once they're doing really well with it, you extend it by giving them that little bit more so that they gain more skills. So when we talk about the zones of proximal development, what we're looking at over here is the safe, comfortable and stable zone. And this is our comfort zone, what we can do now. So, you know, for a simple example is that I like little cars because I'm rubbish at parking, and I'm quite comfortable driving my little cars, and I think I'm quite good when I'm driving little cars. Every so often I might need to drive a slightly bigger car for some other reason, and that makes me a little bit anxious, but I can normally do it if I've got enough scope, if someone gives me a little bit of warning, and if someone was to say, well, let's run it around the block and I'll come with you, and then actually I might just extend my only little cars can be driven by me thought. If you gave me an articulated lorry, there's no way that's happening on earth, because I am going to be so stressed, so anxious and so fearful, it's just not happening. Okay, and that way of learning goes with everything that we do. So when you're looking at your child, what can they do? And the famous saying with this is, what a child can do in cooperation today can do alone tomorrow. So what can they do quite capably at the moment? How do you want them to progress? What can you give? And it's little tiny things that you want to extend. You don't want to give them a whole host of things to do that is beyond their ability, because all you've got is stressed, anxious and fearful young people, and they won't be able to do that. And when we look at normal social and emotional development, so 6 to 9 years, and they can vary a great deal, some will be here, some will be more that way, but they want to be cooperative and conscientious. They desire support and approval. They like to work and play with others. They prefer the friends their own age. They have a strong desire to please, and is proud of and likes to assist their parents, may voluntarily help with their younger siblings. And you can look at the normal social and emotional development for each age groups. You'll find these online if you look them up. And you can kind of gauge then Where's my child fit? Because we know with ADHD children, so your child might be 8, but actually might just be bordering on learning some of this. So actually expecting them to do everything that their peers are doing might not be right for them because they're not quite there yet. And if we gauge it at the right level, we're reducing their stress and actually reduce that chance of getting meltdowns. But at the same time, we can then help them to start extending that, building their confidence, and actually bring them on in a way that develops their ability to be able to manage things. So when we're adopting a consistent routine, this reduces not only their stress, but yours. And it really does help. I've found this one out as well. Using visual planners can help and keep to this if they're younger, support older ones to use their smart tech to aid them with phone reminders. Having clear boundaries and house rules, these should not change. All children test their parents daily. And when I say clear rules and boundaries in a home, I don't mean a whole, poster of rules that go down the wall. You kind of need 2 or 3, and they're really clear. They support the child to know what is expected of them. So it can be things like you leave your mobiles downstairs charging at night, expectations about TV and gaming, expectations about contributing to the family with reasonable chores such as laying the table. Using timers and countdowns can help, and giving clear choices. Do you want this or do you want this? Can all support their ability to manage those extreme emotions that they might feel. So tantrums and meltdowns, this is always the really tricky one. All children have these at some time. You can't ignore a meltdown, because what your child is saying to you is, I feel out of control, help me. And the difficult part for you is to remain calm, because if we shout, we're actually adding fuel to the fire. And when they are in a meltdown or having a tantrum, don't ask them questions, because they're not able to listen. Your child doesn't know what is rational answer anyway. So when you start yelling and shouting at the top of your voice, what is the matter with you? Why are you doing that? They've got no idea at that point, because all they're doing is feeling what is going on inside their bodies. And that's a lot of stress. And it's a lot of wasted breath and energy for them as well. And if you think about it, last time someone was screaming, shouting, or you feel really distressed, did anyone shouting at you make you feel calm? It doesn't tend to make you feel calm. So the don'ts of tantrums and meltdowns: make threats that you'd have no intention of carrying out, because they will just know that that's not ever going to happen. Use sarcasm or belittle them. Scream and shout, because this will escalate it really quickly. And say things you do not mean. So if you're saying to them, I'm not cross and I'm not angry with you, but your body language is saying the opposite, they will know this. So they've reevaluated the levels of body language and communication, how that's done, because of the changes in the way that we communicate with social media. And 57% of your communication is your body language. 36% of it is your tone of voice. And that only leaves 7% that are your words. And we pick this up intuitively. We've all had that experience of walking into a room and feeling immediately uncomfortable, not knowing why we feel uncomfortable, but we pick it up because there's obviously an atmosphere in the room. And children are no different. They pick this up really easily and very quickly. So they will know if you're standing there going, I'm not cross with you at all, but actually your body language and everything, the way that you're saying it says that you are, that actually causes that fear, that anxiety to remain there, and it's not going to calm the tantrum down. So you can try distractions. They're much easier if you use them earlier on. Things like, wow, look at that. And using excitement in your voice when you're trying distractions. Remaining calm, making sure your body language, tone and words match. Understand what is happening. What is it about? And time out can be really useful. And that doesn't always mean time out for them. Sometimes it's time out for us. And I've used time out because sometimes you need it. Just that minute, that ability to just walk out and shut the door. The bathroom was my refuge at times, where you can just stand there and go, oh, I just need to calm it. I just need to feel a little bit more in control of things. And when we look at Dan Siegel, I don't know if anyone's ever seen him. He's brilliant. He's great at what he does, Dr. Dan Siegel. He's got a lot of YouTube videos on there, but his book's The Whole Brain Child for young children, brainstorm about understanding teenagers, but things around like videos about how naming it to tame it. So actually being able to look at the young person, look at it and say, wow, it really looks like you're so upset right now. And actually being able to just be quite calm and able, it's a very different approach to managing those extremes, and really supports a child to develop the skills to be able to start being resilient with their own emotions. And I strongly recommend Dan Siegel. And this is him now talking about the hand model of the brain.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Right, that one's not working then. So I pressed escape on that one. Ah, there we go. So this is the bit where
Sorry, it's not showing.
it's not showing.
No.
Ah, okay. How's that not showing? Because I can see it.
I'm wondering if you need to share your screen again, maybe?
Ah, okay. Maybe I'll try that. So where are we? There we go. Over here. Share screen and okay. Can you see that one now?
We can, but it's not full screen yet.
Yeah,
There we go.
okay. So when we talked earlier about understanding how negative cycles build, and particularly for young people with ADHD, one of the things that's really sad for them is that, you know, they can get the sit down, be quiet, stop doing that, stop running around, stop climbing that, stop hitting your sister. You're not paying attention to me, listen to me. And that goes on all day long. So it's all day long. Shame, and why building a positive self-image is so important, is because we all need to experience and feel that we get things right as human beings. If you imagine going into work and your boss did nothing but go, you've got that wrong, put you down, tell you that you've not got everything right, that you need to go and do more, you need to kind of get that right. Actually, you just want to walk out, wouldn't you? And I don't think many of us would actually stay in a position like that for very long. But with children, often there's real difficulties in being able to escape certain situations. They have to go to school, they have to be able to do these things. When we look at the shield from shame, it's a protective shield that's associated with a range of behaviours. So they might start to lie about what they've done. It wasn't me. And if that doesn't work, blame someone else. Well, she hit me first. I wouldn't have done it because it was her. It was her. And if that doesn't work, then we look at minimising. So I didn't hit her that hard. It wasn't anything like that. And then we make up excuses. So it wasn't my fault because they did it first and I didn't even hit her that hard. And that really kind of winds people up, and it really kind of goes around in circles. And it's, as a strategy, it's really not helpful because it just builds and builds and builds. And all too often it doesn't work. And what causes them more problems then is, and then the more shame for them. And shame is a horrible emotion. It's designed to be a horrible emotion because it makes us try to stop doing things that are shameful. But if you get stuck in a toxic cycle, the only option to protect your core self is rage. And to rage at yourself, at others, and the world. And that's why toxic shame is strongly associated with difficulties with managing anger, and why it is so important that we find ways to support our young people in building a positive self-image, in being able to feel that they can be good in an area, or they can succeed in things and have successes. Because if you think about whatever makes you feel good about things, it's normally those little successes, those wins, that friend that says, oh, it's so great to see you. And if you think about a child that isn't getting those things, why wouldn't they use this shield from shame? And rage becomes something that then becomes really hard. So what the parent was really worried about earlier was, if I help my child with any of these things and you do an assessment and they are not raging, they won't get a diagnosis. And actually rage is not what we're looking at. We might want to understand what that rage is around, but it's not one of the symptoms that we're looking for when we're doing an ADHD assessment. And I'm going to be really honest, the majority, you know, if everyone was really angry and really quite aggressive and violent, actually, I don't think I'd be doing the job for that long. That'll get a little bit tiring. The majority of the young people I see are lovely. They are great. They're wonderful. They're funny. They're quirky. They're interesting. They are delights to work with, and they're all unique. But they don't all rage at me. So we're not looking at, when we're looking at putting in strategies, we're not looking at curing ADHD, because that actually can't happen. But what we're looking at is that they don't have ADHD and build a really negative self-image around that as well. We want them to actually feel positive and have successes and to feel good about themselves. And it's really important that that happens for them. The results for people that have that and are involved in things that they feel successful about is great, because actually they do so much better. So when we're looking at ADHD treatment, we've got another poll. I'm just looking at the time, Sophie, because there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
If you pop it in the chat, and then I'll carry on talking, and then I'll stop in a few minutes and we can look at the results.
Lovely. Okay.
So what is the first line treatment for ADHD? And I'm actually sure that everybody here is such an expert that they will know this anyway. So just tell me when it's in there and then I'll carry on.
It's there now.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're looking at what are first line treatments for ADHD. So treatment for ADHD, the first line are non-medication measures. So unless there are severe symptoms and impairment, so structures, routines, scaffolding, creating charts, having checklists, setting alarms, establishing routines, parent training programs, behavior management, attention training, games and exercises, reasonable adjustments at school as well. One of the things that I often think is this the future? Because ADHD is such a big thing now. There's a lot of research going on in terms of the impact that exercise is having on ADHD. Even I think it was 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn, there was another bit of research that popped up that showed an 80% improvement in ADHD symptoms with a specific kind of exercise where you're using a lot of cardio. I'm a bit of a geek, so I love anything sci-fi, and actually I'm really rubbish at this kind of tech, but I do actually like tech. So I like streaming things, and I love watching things on my iPad and shopping on my iPad. So I like doing things like that. So I got extraordinarily excited when I discovered in America, they have a new FDA approved prescription video game for the treatment of ADHD. And I got so excited about that, because one of the things that I thought about was, oh my God, how popular am I going to be if I can actually prescribe a video game to treat people, rather than that kind of choice. Do you want the video game? Do you want this pill? But I kind of looked into it and found that it's actually only available in America on prescription. So don't get too excited about it, but do have a look at it, because actually it's really quite interesting. And I have emailed them to find out a bit more information and whether they've got any plans to come over here. But I just wonder whether this, this kind of thing is actually something, because what we know is a lot of young people with ADHD actually really like their video games. I know even back when my son was little, it was Game Boys back then, but that was his prized possession. And even now he's really good at being able to, you can't read or write because he's severely dyslexic, but actually give him something and go, I can't get that to work, and he can get that to work. So it's about looking at those skills as well. But is this going to be the future for us? I do hope so, because I'd be so excited to be able to do that. So the role of medication. Right, medication should not be viewed as a tablet cure-all, but it can be used alongside the complement to all of the strategies that we have just been talking about, and those recommended things and the lifestyle choices. If your child gets a diagnosis where it includes severe, which means it's impacting it to a really significant degree in all areas of their life, or to a moderate diagnosis if you've tried all those interventions and there's still those real problems that are occurring for them. And what I would say is, from just years of prescribing and years of using medications, I see much better results for those people that are even in the severe or the moderate areas when you've got those strategies, those structures in place. If they're not in place, the medication actually doesn't do a lot. They really do need to be there to support the medication and what it can do. So really important to kind of keep going with those and not think this tablet might do it all. Dopamine and noradrenaline, we believe that the symptoms of ADHD are associated with having lower levels of brain chemicals, dopamine and noradrenaline in the brain. We don't know exactly how it all works, but we kind of have better understanding now than what we used to. Dopamine is linked to the movement, sleep, mood, attention, motivation, reward, and pleasure. And noradrenaline is linked to memory, alertness, learning. And these chemicals promote feelings of enjoyment and reinforcement to motivate performance. And when we haven't got them, when it's deficit, it makes learning really difficult. And that feeling of like, oh, wow, I've just done really well, and feeling a little bit proud of yourself actually simply isn't there. So that's partly what we're trying to do when we're looking at medications. I'm just thinking, Sophie, do you have the poll results?
I do indeed. I shall share them now. There we go. Can you see them?
Experts in the room. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. There we go. Oh no, it's that one. I think. Yes, there we go. Did I cut out them? All right,
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
it's not sharing.
Okay, right. I'm gonna cross my fingers and hope that we don't have any problems. Okay. There we go. So yeah, it's the last thing I need, because I've got the cat and the dog here next to me, because I have a very old dog who likes to sit next to me on the sofa, and actually is now sitting next to me here. So types of medication. Stimulants is one that methylphenidate has a lot of research about it. The most popular known one, or the most known one, is Ritalin. We don't really use that very often. It's a 4-hour one. We've got better ones than that. If anyone's worried or has heard about the current shortages, it's absolutely true. Yep, we really have major problems with medication across the whole of the country at the moment. So there are quite a number of medications we can't get at the moment. So we're having to be very careful about what we do. But also, again, backs up that thing about actually making sure you've got those other strategies in place as well. So medication, normally first line is methylphenidate. If that doesn't work, we then look to the lisdexamfetamines. And then if that doesn't work, we look to the non-stimulants like atomoxetine and guanfacine. What medication won't or shouldn't do? So it won't stop them answering you back, and it won't stop them truanting, and it won't make them clean their rooms, and it won't make them do the homework. They still need reminders. And it won't turn them into an A student if they're not an A student either. But what it shouldn't do is change their personality, or make them very quiet and still, or make them upset and tearful, or make them feel like they're not able to think properly. We don't want to change their personality. And when we're looking at medication and we're monitoring the medication, we're trying to make sure that actually, I always say to the young people when they're starting on medication, the best response ever is that you take that medication, you come back to me and tell me that you've got no idea why you're taking it because it's not doing anything. And your mum and your school come back to me and say, this is great. He is doing so much better. He's like listening in class and he's really paying attention and he's going to bed on time. And that's a really good response to medication, because we do not want them sitting there looking quiet and not being able to function, because that is not what we want to do to people. All medication has side effects, whether it's paracetamol, whether it's ADHD medication. Insomnia can be one, and that one's kind of a 50-50, if not 80-30. It's some people can get more insomnia with ADHD medication. A lot of people actually, it clears it up because their day is better, they're calmer, they're more able to get on with the things that they like doing. And that means that they settle to bed better. The most common side effect is appetite loss during the daytime with stimulants. They can often feel not hungry. Most little children, that gets managed by thinking about the type of medication, the dosage of it, and giving really good breakfasts and bigger evening meals and snacks. For teenagers, sometimes they will come back and say to us, actually, do you know what, I really don't like this because, you know, I want to go to McDonald's with my mates and I'm not eating anything and I really want to eat something, but I really can't. So can I have something different? Headaches, stomach pains, nausea, vomiting. We don't really want vomiting and very rarely see that one, but headaches, stomach aches and nausea can be really common, particularly in the first week. If they continue, then we're not looking at that medication being okay for them. Dizziness, increased blood pressure, hence why we need to monitor their blood pressure, palpitations, drowsy, skin reactions. And the ones where they're really affecting their mood in a way that we don't want, so being tearful, irritable, increased aggression, being withdrawn, unusually happy or anxious and nervous, depressed or abnormal thinking and tics. And that's normally tics that are new. So for someone that has maybe Tourette's as well as ADHD, we think about the medication when we're doing that. Sometimes we look at starting at a lower dose maybe and thinking about, does that make the tics worse And if it does, then we kind of, okay, let's not use that. But sometimes actually young people say to us, actually, my tics are a lot better. So it's kind of, you never know until you've kind of tried it with them. And do you have to medicate your child? Absolutely not. You do not have to do that. Many people don't do that, even if their child is eligible for it. And your child also has a view, and it's important that we listen to their views as well, because they're really important. And they're the ones that actually have to take it. So it's important that their views about it and their wanting to do it are also equally important. So we've got half an hour left, and we had a lot of questions that came in before the webinars. So the first question was around, my question would be around advice for teachers in high school about in-class strategies to support my child when he's turning on his chair, verbally ticking or talking, and to help him before he gets reprimanded and receives demerits. He gets so upset by them, especially when he felt he couldn't stop himself. One teacher described his behaviour as a choice, and I've tried to explain his condition is not a choice he has made. And it really kind of, I kind of find it quite annoying, to be honest, that actually, you know, 38 years later, I'm still hearing things that I heard 38 years ago, particularly when there's so much information around. And I think it's always very difficult when someone's not thinking about what the person might have that's causing that problem. So when you're looking at wanting information, these are just a couple of websites. So you've got ADHD and You, and this bit at the top here, all of these things here are free and downloadable. And this one is an entire book that you can download, print off, and actually hand to the school, which is about ADHD and all the strategies and things that help within a classroom. But normal strategies are things like not placing them in the least distracting place, not near the window or door, sitting in a position where good eye contact can be maintained, using consistent routines, although difficult wherever, keep to set times, warnings and beginnings and endings of lessons and activities, preparing for transitions. So children with ADHD have difficulty in refocusing their attention, moving from one activity to another. Sometimes secondary school can actually be really good for that, because they get that movement break where they get up and they physically move to another class. And sometimes they really like that change than being in a primary school. Giving clear, concise instructions and effective language patterns, ask the young person to repeat directions back, break tasks into smaller chunks, initially short, and when mastered, gradually increased in complexity, and giving them movement breaks for physical activity into lessons. So giving them the jobs to do, get them to hand the books out and get them all back in, or to take everything round to people. And if you go on to the ADHD and You website, there's a lot of different information on there for other areas as well. The ADHD Foundation, well, if anyone hasn't been on there, it is like a treasure trove of supports and information about pretty much everything to do with neurodiversity, but also additional things. They've got information around tics and Tourette's. They've got information around depression, school stuff. They've got pretty much everything on there. And they're a fantastic charity. They are set up in Liverpool in the rural. They do conferences every year, and school conferences. They train schools as well. I had a wonderful opportunity of their founder actually contacted a few years ago, and I went up and did a presentation at their conference. But the level of support they're able to give and provide is really, really, really good. And in addition to that, I haven't put it on here, but you've also got, a lot of people might have come across the Attitude, which is American based. And if you go on to that one, again, it's free, you just sign up, you can go to lots of webinars. But on their one, there is the ADHD iceberg, which explains ADHD for teachers, and it talks about what is above the surface and then all the difficulties that are below the surface of the iceberg. And that's again another good one that I've often given to parents. I normally add it to the end of reports when I've done them, when they've had assessments, just so that you can actually take it in and discuss it. But absolutely, you can go on there and get that as well. So a really good resource to try and get those things that you can go in and discuss with school. And if you don't get anywhere with the teacher, always think about making that appointment, sitting down with the Senko, and just talking through what your child's having difficulties with and what kind of supports they put in place. So how to recognise ADHD in children aged 3 and what you can do to help support them at nursery and when they begin school. Your older sibling is currently at school. So remember at the start, we looked at the symptoms of ADHD and the degree in which it's appreciably inappropriate for the developmental age. And is it impacting? So when we're looking at, it's again going back to the normal social and emotional developmental levels, and where is your child on that? So we've got 2 to 3, 3 to 4. So if we look at the 2 to 3 years old, you've got all the things that are pretty normal for a child of that age. So having temper tantrums, having a strong sense of ownership, not always being cooperative in their play, might need a security object, becoming a little bit more independent, unable to share, wants to do things for themselves, likes consistency, seesaws between independence and dependence, self-centered, aggressive and temperamental. That's all normal for a child of that age. So what is above and what's beyond for the child? So 3 to 4, you're looking at can be sunny and agreeable, displays feelings in a more acceptable manner, expresses anger physically, hitting, biting, pushing, has strong likes and dislikes. So it's about understanding what is outside of what is normal for that child and that age group. NICE guidance says that we do not screen in nursery, primary or secondary universally. So the advice for someone with a child that age would be to seek support from your health visitor. Start with the parenting groups and supports, because there aren't services that are going to assess before the age of 6 for ADHD. So do that and then think about what else. And also keep in mind those other issues that might be looking like ADHD that could be causing it as well. And if there are real issues around their development, i.e. you're looking at this and thinking, hang on, my child's actually over here somewhere, they're not even reaching this 2 to 3 years, that would be the time especially to talk to your health visitor and maybe thinking about, you need to be seeing a pediatrician to look at their development, which is something slightly different to what we do within CAMS. So another question that has come in, the teacher doesn't seem to really understand ADHD and associated symptoms such as RSD and masking, and hasn't been helpful at all when completing the form. Is there anything bar a private diagnosis that I can do? So masking, this term wasn't so much used. This term is being really understood well within the ASC literature. But wasn't used in relation to ADHD very often at all. And it first appeared with Professor Russell Barkley's book, Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, in 2015, when he started to talk about ADHD people trying to show others that they got their ADHD under control. And research on masking for ADHD is very limited and it has not been studied extensively. So we use caution when we use the term masking when we're talking about children, because it's generally identified in much older teenagers and adults because of the level of strategies they need to employ to mask. Because ADHD, when they are younger, is very much around how they are and how difficult it is for them to engage. So actually using a lot of strategies. So even for someone who's really inattentive, as an adult might have got strategies around. So I know that if I don't write something in that book and I haven't color coded this, I'm going to be hopeless, and everyone at work is going to find out that I'm really disorganized. My house is a complete tip. Everything is all over the place. I I can't organize anything in the house. But at work, I'm really great. So actually what I've got is these techniques that I'm using, and I use really rigidly to manage how that is in that setting. Now, if you start to put those skills onto an 8-year-old, it doesn't quite fit, because they wouldn't be able to do that for 8 hours in a day. So when we're looking at masking, it's being careful about what we're talking about, and taking the time to meet with the teacher and asking them about what is it that they see or not see, and how are they doing? What is it that is, you know, are they doing as well as would be expected for their achievement level? And then starting that conversation from there. But that doesn't mean, because we will be going on to a little bit, I know this often comes up in relation to girls, and we will go on to that in a little bit, because that's come up in another question as well. So hold that bit in mind. I don't know if anyone's, this is one that even a lot of professionals come and say to me, have I heard of rejection sensitive dysphoria? Yes, I have. It's not exclusive to ADHD. Rejection sensitive dysphoria comes from a description around extreme emotional pain and sensitivity that is triggered by the perception of being criticized by important figures in your life and growing with that, and failing to meet the standards. So again, we would look at being a little bit careful when we're talking about children. And if you think back to everything we've looked at around developing negative cycles, the shield from shame, how this might then come alongside this, because it's not a diagnosis. It's a description of extreme emotional intensity. So actually being, you know, feelings becoming unbearable, being criticized about getting something wrong can be so intensely unbearable that the behavior can be either externalized or internalized, you know, with rage. So again, if you think about the parallels to that shield from shame and start to understand why a young person might develop something like this as they're growing older, because that's all they're hearing is constant criticism about how they function. It's actually thinking a little bit more about how do we stop that from happening, and how do we help them, if they've already started to develop that, from really finding those opportunities to really improve their self-esteem and how they function. So as I said, RSD is not a recognised diagnosis, and there are 3 reasons why the emotional dysregulation, or RSD, will never be included in the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. And that is because it's not always present. And it comes in triggered episodes. So it's not a symptom of ADHD. What we know is that some people with ADHD that maybe are developing in that way, where they've got caught in negative cycles, this might become a problem, but it's not seen in everybody. And certainly I don't see it in everyone at all. And people with RSD are usually ashamed of their overreactions and hide them so that they will not be further embarrassed or thought of as mentally or emotionally unstable. And even when it is present, it can't be measured, and therefore it can't get published into research. So supporting a child who you feel may present with RSD is around co-regulation, actually giving them the skills to manage intense feelings, actually being able to point out, earshot them, you know, constantly see, you're talking to your mum on the phone, you know, their grandparent going, oh my God, I was so proud of her the other day. You should have seen this, absolutely brilliant. You know, those little things really improve self-esteem because they can hear them happening and they're not things that you're directly saying to them. If you've got a child that maybe does present with some of these difficulties, thinking about taking a parenting with PACE course, and PACE stands for the playfulness, acceptance, curiosity and empathy. It's a lot more focused around managing those attachments and also those intensity of emotions for young people. The positive parenting strategies, the Triple P groups, building their confidence, avoiding criticism, engage them in activities they can succeed in and build their confidence. And this will support them developing a strong and secure base with you, knowing you understand their fear of being rejected. And it's really important that we do that. So another question is, I wanted to know more info about if you will cover anything about ADHD and food obsession and compulsive behaviour around food. this has been around. I noticed this years and years ago. It's actually only kind of pretty recently being talked about more openly. So if you look back at the chemical neurotransmitters that were associated with ADHD, so the dopamine in particular, it plays a part. And what we know is that food cravings, especially for high sugar and simple carbohydrate-based foods, can give a quick hit. So our dopamine levels go like that. And in older teens and adults, this can lead to a problem. So a lot of the research that's been done at the moment is looking at why is it that some older teens and adults with ADHD are obese. And thinking about, and if you think about it, it starts to make sense. So think about the last time you were tired and stressed. Did you pick up an apple or did you go for the chocolate bar? Because I can guarantee most people do not pick up the apple, they go for the chocolate bar. And this is where it comes from, because that kind of instant feedback loop from your dopamine with the chocolate and the sweets is kind of like, whoa, that's great. And then you can see how that can start. For younger children also, and I know this was absolutely true for my boy, the levels of activity, my word, I mean, even now he is like a stick thin because he's constantly on the go all the time. And he just eats and eats and eats. So actually when they're really young and they've got those really high levels of activity, it might simply mean that they're actually burning a lot of calories, or they're trying to switch on that alert system. So actually they're trying to counteract that deficit in their ability to be able to function and focus. So yes, absolutely, there are these links there. And what we normally look at is, you know, increasing that exercise, actually getting those hits via natural food. So, you know, fruit contains sugar. It's just natural sugar as opposed to processed sugar. So trying to kind of balance those things out can be really supportive for them. Next question was, I'd like to know if there are any links with dyslexia and ADHD. Can one aggravate the other? Absolutely, there are links with ADHD, and this is a picture of dyslexia and how it affects the brain. You can see there things like with organizational problems with note-taking, being able to filter out background noise. So 25 to 40% of young people with ADHD also have dyslexia. If having both, then the difficulties of one can impact on the other. And I know that purely with my son. Dyslexia is quite severe, so he managed to even now really struggles with anything needs reading, writing. So it can have a huge impact. And again, then you've got to counteract actually the ADHD and having real difficulties in being able to learn the same as your peers. You've got to be really strong around how do you build their confidence and their self-esteem about what they are good at, because that becomes even more important when they've got some of these additional difficulties. And if in dyslexia, they can have real difficulties with time and being able to filter distractions. And when assessing, we're looking at is it one or is it both causing the problems? So we do look at these really closely. Can children mask behaviours in school, then display poor behaviour at home? It depends on the age of the child and what you really mean in terms of masking. As discussed earlier, in terms come from adult literature, not children's. Very hard for them to mask for 8 hours. The advice will be to take a positive parenting course offered in many areas, support you with the strategies to support them at home. And then again, also having those conversations, those really close conversations with teachers, because it's worth keep checking in, because what one teacher doesn't see, another teacher might see, and actually having that conversation with Senkos as well. So we got another load of questions that all came at once. So what are the benefits of a diagnosis? Right back at the very beginning, we had that video. So actually it's about understanding your child's unique differences and what type of strategies would work from them. So really provides them with some kind of context. And I think the way neurodiversity is going now, and being understood now, it's less, hopefully it will grow and continue, less of a stigma and more about understanding the uniqueness of that person and the way that their brain works in a wonderful way that is just slightly different to other people's. And so bringing up again quite naturally, not seeing it as that stereotypical awful old image of ADHD is just people that throw chairs and tables across rooms, because it's not that at all, never has been. But actually starting to see the wonderfulness that is about having that diagnosis and who those people are. What support can be offered in our trust following diagnosis? We do psychoeducation, and we also are commissioned to provide medication monitoring to those who meet the criteria for medication. Real shame, it's great that I've, you know, because this is a bit of a passion of mine, doing this kind of stuff. Really great that we can get to do these webinars, because the support outside of schools and with no diagnosis, I've got the slide, it's coming up, but there are other services that were commissioned to provide that, not us. So we will go through those. And also in your areas via the SPOA links, you can often refer yourself if you need additional support in the home around early help key work. Current wait time for an ADHD diagnosis, current wait time is over 2 years. And just take in mind that we are working, cannot even begin to describe how hard we work, but we get hundreds, and I am talking about hundreds of referrals every month, and that does not stop. So our wait lists are very long. So bear with us, we are constantly reviewing, we're constantly looking at how we might speed that up, but we also have to balance that with making sure it's a robust and really valid assessment at the same time. Next slide for support outside of school or when there's no diagnosis, and the same with parenting groups where you might be able to learn about the condition. So in East Sussex, Brighton and Hove, the amazing guys at Amaze are fantastic. There's a whole neurodevelopmental pathway within their service, and they support at each stage of the developmental pathway to help families manage the challenges that children and young people face. They're fantastic, they're great, they've got groups. There's one that's starting recently. I know that we were trying to get people to go to that. And in West Sussex, you have Reaching Families, which are there to empower, inform and support parents and carers and families of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities in West Sussex. And again, if you go to our Sussex Partnership website and you go for the CAMS option and then you look for the neurodevelopmental link, you'll keep clicking onto those different links and you'll get to help and support, local support, and it will come up with 3 different boxes. One's for East Sussex, one's for West Sussex, one's for Brighton and Hove. And if you click on them, there's loads of resources that are for specific to those individual areas, because what is on offer is not always the same in each area. Questions. When you've gotten down on your child's level and given clear, short instructions can be given repeatedly and they ignore you, is this just them ignoring you or part of their ADHD? And what do you do when you are being repeatedly ignored? So the first thing is understanding what the behavior is about and ruling out any other issues that may be causing that problem. So first of all, actually, can I hear you? Have you had the hearing checked? Do they have any speech and language delays? If so, is what you're saying at the speed and the level that they can understand? So remembering those zones of proximal development, because sometimes I think people hear the word speech and language delay, or they're getting speech and language input, but don't always understand what something like a receptive language delay might mean. And that means that if you talk at speed and you're talking really quickly and using big words, I won't be able to follow any of that. But it means if you slow down and you stop and you talk in a way that I can follow, I might be able to hear you and be then able to follow you. So often it's about using some strategies around how you deliver the information as well. Is the environment distraction free? Have you interrupted their game? If you've done that, they're just not going to listen anyway. Are they actually fearful of being criticized, or, you know, I've got it wrong again, or I'm in trouble again? They don't want to hear it. They hear it enough. They don't want to hear it again. So it's about what is that individual setting and what is going on for them as well, and thinking about that a little bit more. There's no hard and fast rule about whether it's ADHD or whether it's they're just ignoring you. generally they're not ignoring you. Maybe there's other stuff that's going on for them. How can you differentiate between ADHD behaviour and typical 5 and 6-year-old behaviour? Hopefully you have been reassured that when we're assessing, that's exactly what we're looking at, what is normal, what is not for that developmental age, that social development. And I'll tell you now, having sat in reception year 1 classes for years, there is not one 5 or 6-year-old that sits still and focuses. In fact, if I ever saw a 5 or 6-year-old sitting still for a long period of time, I would have actually been quite worried about them, because it's really normal for them to run around, play and be doing all sorts of things. So what we're looking at when we're assessing is what's above that, and what would be expected for their normal level of development. Should you talk through every time they've had big emotions, or just move on, or depend on the child? I'd say it depends on the situation. Learn to pick your battles. Is it something that is important that they learn from, or is it something you've talked about over and over and over again? So if you remember, being ADHD means that you are told to sit still, pay attention, stop doing that, stop it, be quiet, you listen a great deal. So think about other ways to support their learning through play. So actually, you know, if you want to teach them how to cross the road properly when they're really little, the road map and cars is a great way to kind of make a game about how do you stop, and using figures. When is it safe to cross? You tell me. You can find inventive ways to do that. But if they've had really big emotions and you know what that's about, they know what it's about normally as well. They don't need you to tell them that they've done something really, really bad, because you're starting the shame cycle. Their big emotion is telling you they already feel it. But if it's really important, and it's something that is really, really important. So, you know, for me, it was like, you've just taken your brother's watch again. Okay, I'll let that one go because I've got it back and it's fine. And I'm fed up with hearing my own voice. But you being at the top of the 60-foot tree with the cheese that you stole out of my fridge, I'm going to have a bit of a chat with you about that one, because you could fall out the tree. So it's about picking where it's really important. What is the difference between ADHD between boys and girls? And this one came up again this morning as well. So ADHD in girls. The symptoms of ADHD in girls are lack of concentration, easily distracted, excessive talking, acting without thinking, making careless mistakes, fidgeting. Oh, look, they're all the same symptoms. What we see is that boys and girls can be a bit of a tomboy, so they're actually far more physically active, defiant, disorganized and messy, tries hard to please, acts and thinks later. I've seen boys and girls appear as the daydreamers, so can appear more shy, worried, forgetful, daydream a lot. And to be fair, we do see more girls in this one, but I do see boys in this one as well. And actually, I think boys now, because the literature is so much better, tend to get overlooked more if they're like this, because people aren't picking that one up on boys. They're going to stereotypical viewpoints on how it appears. You're really clever ones, you're bright and achieves well, problems with organisation, increased difficulties in secondary school. They often, and if you're talking about your girls, and this is where I think masking might come into it, is often your clever clogs is really bright, really sociable, or they might be a bit of a chatterbox, but actually it's not seen as a problem because they're doing so well. And they're really helpful and the teacher really likes them, they've got lots of friends. But the difficulties that appear then when they get to secondary school are not being able to keep up, not being able to do that organisational stuff for themselves. And that's where you might see that suddenly start to appear. And that's why we do see people around 11 getting referred to us, because they've struggled with the transition from primary to secondary. And your chatterbox is, you know, hyper talkative, restless, interrupts, which is sort of silly, crazy, hyper social. And again, you can imagine, if you kind of think about if you know young people that have got ADHD, I know the ones that fit in all those boxes. And I would say I've got boys and girls that fit into all of those boxes as well. So when we're assessing, we're looking at, again, for boys and girls, how does it present for them? Because it does not present in one way for every person. So it's different for people. when they're having big emotions, how is it best to deal with it? Hold them, talk to them. If they don't like talking, do just ignore the situation. So again, stay calm, the whole brain child, understanding emotional responses, timeout, sensory temp, what works for your child. Often talking over them, shouting and getting upset with them increases the intensity of what they're already feeling. And again, go back to that thing around negative cycles, understanding that shame response. And don't ignore again, but equally do not react with heightened emotions. So when you think about it, when you were last really upset or angry, would someone have kind of talking at you or shouting at you or trying to hold you have worked? Because they're not that different from us in some ways. And if you think about it, it could be quite scary if you're really already kind of like really upset, you know, and you see it a lot where someone's got themselves worked up and someone goes to even just give them a hug and they go, get off, stay away. So it's about knowing that child and how and what might work for them. And think again about, you know, they flip the lid. What we have to do and what we're trying to do with the strategies is be able to bring on this bit of the brain back in line with the bottom bit so they're able to calm and they feel that they can. And what they need when they feel like that is someone who is calm and a feeling that you can cope with them. And saying something like, you know what, I can see that you're really, really upset. Let me know when you're ready and I'll give you a hug, you know. And it might be they've done something appalling and angry, but actually if you want them to calm down, it's about really kind of understanding how that happens and how they might bring down. And if you think about it, if someone says to you, right, you know, you need to stop that, or when you're ready, you know, just stop and I'm going to be here for you. Which one are you going to respond to with more anger and which one are you going to calm to? It's not going to be with raised voice. Does food play a big part in their behaviour? I'm just looking at the time. I'm sure you're all absolutely tired. Is there any research about, right, so food doesn't cause ADHD. Some foods can make things worse, such as lots of sweets, energy drinks, and not having a balanced diet. How can you redirect their focus when the switch is flicked? So remember, flip the lid. Remember, no one, and that is no adult, no child, whether you've got a diagnosis or anything, once you've flipped that bit, you haven't got any logical thought left. You're running on this bit of your brain. So no one can think logically or take on instructions, even us. So understand your child. Do they need reassurance? Are they frustrated with themselves because they have got it wrong? Again, be present, be calm. Let your body language tell them that you're there for them. They will calm so much quicker. Destimulate the environment, move siblings or other people on, because there's nothing worse than thinking everyone's watching you when you're already emotional. It just keeps it going, and this adds to them not being able to calm. Another question was, what is an EHCP? It's an educational healthcare plan. We can have nothing to do with that because it doesn't fall within our remit. You have to go through schools for that. It's not automatic with the diagnosis. And the IPSI address is an independent charity where you can get further advice on that. But you will need to speak to your child's school as it's done by the Education Authority. What is it that switches in their brains? So quickly, from laying settled in bed, then shaking arms and legs and making loud noises, and having a half-hour manic time. That was a really hard question to ask without knowing your child. If I knew your child, I'd probably be able to give you a much better answer than this. So the first question when I read it was, do you have tics? Do they have tics? What are they doing when they're laying settled in bed? Are they really settled, or are they really thinking about what's happened in the day? Do they struggle to really settle and relax? Have you tried relaxation exercises at bedtime? They're really great to do together. The Calm app has relaxation stories. But if you're worried about anything else, I would talk to your GP or talk to your health visitor or talk to your nurse, depending on the age of your child, and find out a little bit more. Okay, but I can't really give you an answer based on that one because there's so many questions I would have that I want to know the answer to before I could do that. So if you don't, pretty much, just a minute over, sorry everyone. Things to remember: having ADHD can be hard for you and your child. Find areas that they can excel in: sports, art, drama. This is so important to help them develop a positive image of themselves. Never underestimate the impact feeling good about what you can achieve has on the behaviour you see. It really does make a huge difference, because if you think about it for yourself, any time that you might have felt bad about something in life, actually you'll know what that feels like. And one of my favorite little sayings for ADHD is, kids with ADHD need someone in their corner. And even if you do not have all the answers, just be that person that's there, that is kind of cheerleading them along and actually sees the positive in them. And then we have resources which are going to go into the chat, and so you can copy and paste them from there. Thank you, everybody. I pretty much went over 2 minutes. Sorry, everyone. I know it's really late, but thank you all for attending, and I hope it's been of some use to you.